Chapter 6, learning. We're going to talk about learning and everything that goes along with it. So let's go ahead and start learning. Chapter 6, learning. Birds nest. Birds build nests in the spring and migrate as winter approaches. Actually, this is the second time I've started this lecture. My daughter called just a minute ago. So I've already been through this once. Infants suckle at their mother's breast. Dogs shake water off their wet fur. Salmon swim upstream to spawn. Spiders spin intricate webs. All the examples that I just talked about are unlearned behaviors. Both instincts and reflexes are innate. They're unlearned behaviors that organisms are born with. Reflexes are a motor or neural reaction to a specific stimulus in the environment. They tend to be simpler than instincts, involve the activity of specific body parts and systems, for example, the knee jerk reflex and the contraction of pupils in bright light, and involve more primitive centers of the central nervous system, for example, the spinal cord and the medulla. Instincts are innate behaviors that are triggered by a broader range of events, such as maturation and the change of seasons. The more complex patterns of behavior involve movements of the organism as a whole, for example, sexual activity and migration, and involve higher brain centers. Both reflexes and instincts help an organism adapt to its environment and do not have to be learned. For example, every healthy human baby has a sucking reflex present at birth. Babies are born knowing how to suck on a nipple, whether artificial from a bottle or human. Learning is a relatively permanent change in the behavior or knowledge that results from experience. In contrast to the innate behaviors discussed above, learning involves acquiring knowledge and skills through experience. Learning has traditionally been studied in terms of its simplest components, the associations our minds automatically make between events. Our minds have a natural tendency to connect events that occur closely together or in sequence. Associative learning occurs when an organism makes connections between stimuli or events that occur together in the environment. In classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian conditioning, organisms learn to associate events or stimuli that repeatedly happen together. Classical conditioning is a process by which we learn to associate stimuli and, consequently, to anticipate events. You have a cat named Tiger who is quite spoiled. You keep her food in a separate cabinet, and you also have a special electric can opener that you use only to open cans of cat food. For every meal, Tiger hears the distinctive sound of the electric can opener and then gets her food. Tiger quickly learns that when she hears the can opener, she's about to get fed. When Tiger hears the electric can opener, she will likely get excited and run to where you are preparing her food. And there you go, and they hear the can opener. In classical conditioning, the initial period of learning is known as acquisition, when an organism learns to connect a neutral stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus. During acquisition, the neutral stimulus begins to elicit the conditioned response, and eventually the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus capable of eliciting the conditioned response by itself. Timing is important for conditioning to occur. Typically, there should only be a brief interval between presentation of the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus. Taste aversion is a type of conditioning in which an interval of several hours may pass between the conditioned stimulus, something ingested, and the unconditioned stimulus, nausea or illness. The individual become instantly averse to food. And this happened to me once upon a time. This happened to me. My wife had made, what was it? It was hamburger helper, taco hamburger helper. And she used these kinds of chips. Well, there was something either wrong with the hamburger or there was something wrong with the helper because because I ate it the night before, and when I went to work the next day, I vomited. Oh, it was terrible. And after that, I couldn't eat corn chips. I couldn't eat corn chips anymore. That was a long time ago. It was my first wife, so I haven't been married to her for, let me think. Uh, it was when we first got married, so that was 70, 71. So it's been over 50 years. And now I can eat corn chips. I can eat corn chips now, but for about 30 years I couldn't eat corn chips. That's why there's a picture of corn chips. Once upon a time, oh, this is it, with a wife who lives far, far away, Slayton, Texas. The last I heard, she made taco hamburger helper for dinner. Okay, that's the same story I just told you. And there you go. I couldn't eat corn chips for a long, long, long time. How does this occur? Conditioning based on a single instance and involving an extended a time lapse between the event and the negative stimulus. Research into taste aversion suggests this response may be an evolutionary adaptation designed to help organisms quickly learn to avoid harmful foods. And the same thing happened to my wife, my current wife. Um, she was at a circus, and bought they bought grape snow cones, and there was something wrong with the grape. They all got sick, and to this day, she will not eat anything that is artificially grape flavored. Which is the same aversion with coconut, strangely enough. Pavlov explored a scenario in his experiments with dogs where attempted to stop the conditioned response. He stopped pairing unconditioned stimulus with the conditioned stimulus. Soon the dog stopped responding to the tone. Extinction is a decrease in the conditioned response when the unconditioned stimulus is no longer presented with the conditioned stimulus. Pavlov was not done. After he extinguished the conditioned stimulus, he reintroduced it after a period of time. To his surprise, there was no period of learning. The dog immediately responded to the old conditioned stimulus. This Pavlov called spontaneous recovery. Let me give you a tragic example from my own life. Once upon a time, I was married to a woman who tried to poison me with taco hamburger helper. Because I am boring and uncool, she decided that she would rather be around other men than live with me and her two children. She left us and moved back home. I was stationed in Lubbock, Texas at the time. Her messing around really bothered me. The word for it is cuckolding, and just saying the word brings winks and nods from everyone but the cuckolded man. After 6 months, she called and wanted to come back because she missed me and the kids so much. Did I remember all the heartache and lonely nights that she caused? Did I remember all the heartache and lonely nights that she caused? No. All I remembered was all the good times we had and how we were happy once struggling through life with our two children. Not to worry, neither of us had changed. I was still as boring and uncool as I had been before. She was still looking for more excitement than an ugly man with two children can provide. This time she ran off with my best friend who drove a sports car. She no longer had to ride in my family station wagon. Yay. Of course, she didn't look like that. When I go to a restaurant, I order Mountain Dew. If they have Coke products instead of Pepsi, they always offer me Mellow Yellow. The two are the same color and have similar tastes, but anyone who is an aficionado of Mountain Dew can tell the difference by the smell, let alone the taste. This is stimulus discrimination. No mellow yellow for me. Back in the day, in the 1980s, they had cola wars. Pepsi would try to outsell Coke by lowering their prices. RC Cola sometimes got involved, so you never knew what cola you were getting if it was a fountain drink. But the three colas don't taste alike, and eventually people started asking for Pepsi or Coke. People had developed stimulus discrimination with colas. Of course, not everyone cared to participate in the cola wars, so they drank whatever was served, saying things like, they all taste alike. I can't tell the difference anyway, so give me a cola. This was stimulus generalization. John B. Watson is considered the founder of behaviorism. Behaviorism is a school of thought that arose during the first part of the 20th century, which incorporates elements of Pavlov's classical conditioning. This was in stark contrast with Freud, who considered the reasons for behavior to be hidden in the unconscious. Watson championed the idea that all behavior can be studied as a simple stimulus response reaction, without regard for internal processes. Watson argued that in order for psychology to become a legitimate science, it must shift its concern away from internal mental processes because mental processes cannot be seen or measured. Instead, he asserted that psychology must focus on outward observable behavior that can be measured. According to Watson, human behavior, just like animal behavior, is primarily the result of conditioned responses. Whereas Pavlov's work with dogs involved the conditioning of reflexes, Watson believed the same principles could be extended to the conditioning of human emotions. Through experiments, Watson demonstrated how fears can be conditioned. So this is, what was his name? This is a baby that Watson worked with, and this baby loved furry things. So Watson conditioned him to be afraid of fur, and here he is screaming because his rabbit is on his lap, whereas before he used to play with rats and mice and rabbits and everything. All of a sudden, Watson conditioned him to be afraid of furry things, to the extent that he was afraid of his mother's fur collar on her coat. Sadly, Watson never deconditioned him. Psychologist B.F. Skinner saw that classical conditioning is limited to existing behaviors that are reflexively elicited, and it doesn't account for new behaviors such as riding a bike. Skinner believed that behavior is motivated by the consequences we receive for the behavior, the reinforcements and punishments. His idea that learning is a result of consequences is based on the law of effect, which was first proposed by psychologist Edward Thorndike. Oh, that's a picture, that's B.F. Skinner. According to the law of effect, behaviors that are followed by consequences that are satisfying to the organism are more likely to be repeated, and behaviors that are followed by unpleasant consequences are less likely to be repeated. Essentially, if an organism does something that brings about a desired result, the organism is more likely to do it again. If an organism does something that does not bring about a desired result, the organism is less likely to do it again. Skinner began conducting scientific experiments on animals, mainly rats and pigeons, to determine how organisms learn through operant conditioning. He placed these animals inside an operant conditioning chamber, which has come to be known as a Skinner box. And this is what a Skinner box looks like. You push the lever and he gets food. A Skinner box contains a lever for rats or a disc for pigeons that the animal can press or peck for a food reward via the dispenser. Speakers and lights can be associated with certain behaviors. A recorder counts the number of responses made by the animal. In operant conditioning, positive and negative do not mean good and bad. Instead, positive means you are adding something and negative means you are taking something away. Reinforcement means you are increasing a behavior, and punishment means that you are decreasing a behavior. Reinforcement can be positive or negative, and punishment can also be positive or negative. All reinforcers, positive or negative, increase the likelihood of a behavioral response. All punishers, positive or negative, decrease the likelihood of a behavioral response. Positive reinforcement, something is added to increase the likelihood of a behavior. Negative reinforcement, something is removed to increase the likelihood of a behavior. You can't play until you clean your room. Positive punishment, something is added to decrease the likelihood of a behavior. In this case, the something that is added is the scolding. Negative punishment, something is removed to decrease the likelihood of a behavior. The best way to teach a person or animal a behavior is to use positive reinforcement. When an organism receives a reinforcer each time it displays a behavior, it is called continuous reinforcement. Once a behavior is trained, researchers and trainers often turn to another type of reinforcement schedule, partial reinforcement. And partial reinforcement also refers to an intermittent enforcement. The person or animal does not get reinforced every time they perform the desired behavior. It's partial. It's only every once in a while. There are several different types of partial reinforcement schedules. These schedules are described as either fixed or variable, and as either interval or ratio. Fixed refers to the number of responses between reinforcements, or the amount of time between reinforcements, which is set and unchanging. Variable refers to the number of responses or amount of time between reinforcements, which varies or changes. Interval means the schedule is based on the time between reinforcements, and ratio means the schedule is based on the number of responses between reinforcements. A fixed interval reinforcement schedule is when behavior is rewarded after a set amount of time. After major surgery, a patient is given an IV drip with a patient-controlled painkiller. The doctor sets a limit, 1 dose per hour. If the patient pushes the button a dozen times, they still only receive a single dose of medication. Since a reward only occurs on a fixed interval, there is no point in exhibiting the behavior since it will not be rewarded. With variable interval reinforcement schedule, the person or animal gets a reinforcement based on varying amounts of time, which are unpredictable. Bill loved to ski, but only when there was fresh powder. It was too icy otherwise. Sometimes Bill was able to ski every weekend, and other winters it was 5 or 6 weeks between skiing expeditions. With a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule, there are a set number of responses that must occur before the behavior is rewarded. Oh, I thought maybe a pig was going to explode or something. Nope. If I get $1,000 every 2 weeks and I take $100 of that and buy a savings bond, I am being paid in buying savings bonds on a fixed ratio schedule. In a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, the number of responses needed for a reward varies. This is the most powerful partial reinforcement schedule. An example of the variable ratio reinforcement schedule is gambling. Gamblers pump quarters into a slot machine all night without a payout. Because the reinforcement schedule in most types of gambling has a variable ratio schedule, people keep trying and hoping that the next time they will win big. This is one of the reasons gambling is so addictive and so resistant to extinction. In operant conditioning, extinction of a reinforced behavior occurs at some point after reinforcement stops, and the speed at which this happens depends on the reinforcement schedule. In a variable ratio schedule, the point of extinction comes very slowly. But in the other reinforcement schedules, extinction may come quickly. Strict behaviorists like Watson and Skinner focused exclusively on studying behavior rather than cognition, such as thoughts and expectations. In fact, Skinner was such a staunch believer that cognition didn't matter that his ideas were considered radical behaviorism. Skinner considered the mind a black box, something completely unknowable, and therefore something not to be studied. Behaviorist Edward C. Tolman had a different opinion. Tolman's experiments with rats demonstrated that organisms can learn even if they do not receive immediate reinforcement. This finding was in conflict with the prevailing idea at the time that reinforcement must be immediate in order for learning to occur, thus suggesting a cognitive aspect to learning. Tolman placed hungry rats in a maze with no reward for finding their way through it. He also studied a comparison group that was rewarded with food at the end of the maze. As the unreinforced rats explored the maze, they developed a cognitive map, a mental picture of the layout of the maze. After 10 sessions in the maze without reinforcement, food was placed in a gold box at the end of the maze. As soon as the rats became aware of the food, they were able to find their way through the maze quickly, just as quickly as the comparison group, which had been rewarded with food all along. This is known as latent learning, learning that occurs but is not observable in behavior until there is a reason to demonstrate it. And there you go. You can do it, you can do it. Oh, looking for the food. Latent learning. He knows where he's going. Latent learning also occurs in humans. Children may learn by watching the actions of their parents, but only demonstrate it at a later date when when the learned material is needed. And of course, this is the way it works with alcohol. This is the way it works with tobacco. Hopefully, there are positive things that children pick up from their parents, but unfortunately, there are also negative things that they pick up from their parents. In observational learning, we learn by watching others and then imitating or modeling what they do or say. The individuals performing the imitated behavior are called models. Research suggests that this imitative learning involves a specific type of neuron called a mirror neuron. And mirror neurons are actually fairly, uh, we didn't know about mirror neurons for the longest time. And this is new information pretty much. We found them, we didn't realize what they were doing, what they were there for. Now we understand that mirror neurons are something that teach us. Um, they they create pathways, and they are in our brains, and that's where the imitative behavior comes from our mirror neurons. So potentially, we don't have to do something in order for it to become a repetitive behavior. We don't have to practice it. That's what I'm trying to say, and we can still do the behavior. And this was taught by Albert Bandura. He's the one that came up with the social learning theory. As a matter of fact, this is his experiment. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. Psychologist Albert Bandura's ideas about learning were different from those of strict behaviorists. Bandura proposed a brand of behaviorism called social learning theory, which took cognitive processes into account. Bandura felt that internal mental states must have a role in learning, that observational learning involves much more than imitation. According to LaFrancois in 2012, there are several ways that observational learning can occur. You learn a new response. You choose whether or not to imitate the model depending on what you saw happen to the model. You learn a general rule that you can apply to other situations. Bandura identified three kinds of models: live, verbal, and symbolic. A live model demonstrates a behavior in person. A verbal instructional model does not perform the behavior, but instead explains or describes a behavior. A symbolic model can be fictional characters or real people who demonstrate behaviors in books, movies, television shows, video games, or internet sources. And of course, here's a guy acting like Popeye. I am what I am. I am disgustipated. Bandura describes specific steps in the process of modeling that must be followed if learning is to be successful: attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. You must be focused on what the model is doing. You have to pay attention. You must be able to retain or remember what you observed. This is retention. You must be able to perform the behavior that you observed and committed to memory. This is reproduction. And you must have motivation. You must be focused on what the model is doing. You have to pay attention. You must be able to retain or remember what you observed. This is retention. You must be able to perform the behavior that you observed and committed to memory. This is reproduction. You must have motivation. One needs to want to copy the behavior, and whether or not one is motivated depends on what happened to the model. If the model was reinforced, one will be more motivated to copy them. This is known as vicarious reinforcement. Here, take a drink, just like the rest of us. If you observe the model being punished, you would be less motivated to copy them. This is called vicarious punishment. You don't have to be punished yourself to learn not to do it. Bandura conducted an experiment with a 5-foot inflatable Bobo doll. In the experiment, children's aggressive behavior was influenced by whether the teacher was punished for her behavior. In one scenario, a teacher acted aggressively with the doll, hitting, throwing, and even punching the doll while a child watched. There were two types of responses by the children to the teacher's behavior. When the teacher was punished for her bad behavior, the children decreased their tendency to act as she had. When the teacher was praised or ignored and not punished for her behavior, the children imitated what she did and even what she said. Okay, and that's the Bobo doll. I used to actually have one of these when I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old. Okay.
The segment you're about to see is taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled the doll with the mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down, and beat it.
It had sand in the bottom of it. That's why it's like that. And the nose, if you punch the nose, it honks.
It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic.
It's actually a lot of fun.
Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language. The room contained varied play materials.
Calculus is hard because it is different. It
Yeah,
introduces completely new concepts.
it's true. It's true. Okay, there you go. Bobo the doll. What a blast he was. And that's why I showed you the picture. Wait a minute. That picture. There you go. Good old Bobo. And that's it. Okay, well, I'll talk to you again next week. Next week, we talk about intelligence. I looked it up this time. So, there you go. Yeah, we'll talk to you again next week.